Bonjour mes amis, je m'appelle Tito, je fais des vidéos sur les finances personnelles sur mon autre chaîne, mais sur cette chaîne, je parle d'autres choses comme aujourd'hui où je vais revoir le film Mikolo.
During their holiday at their grandmother's hometown, two young children befriend a magical creature from a mystical place called Irumole forest. When the creature is captured, they attempt to rescue it and return it to its home. Mikolo is directed by Niyi Akinmolayan.
Now, this review will most likely contain spoilers because it will be hard for me to talk about this particular film, Mikolo, without revealing certain intricate details of the plot and the story. So, if you plan on seeing Mikolo, irrespective of whether it's good or it's bad, I suggest you stop watching this review right now and you go and see Mikolo. But if you don't mind or if you don't care, then keep watching. Secondly, sometimes when I do these Nollywood movie reviews, the actors in the films, they stumble on my reviews. So I won't be surprised if the child stars in this film, Moyi and Pamileri, if they stumble on this review as well. If two of you are watching, I just want to say that I'm proud of both of you. You did rather well. However, I did have issues with this movie, and I'm going to be talking about those issues in this review. But please, the issues I had with Mikolo had nothing to do with you. Like I said, I'm proud of both of you. You did really well, okay? Yeah. Ideally, I don't think you guys should be watching this review, but I know children will be children, and you guys will probably stumble on this review. So yeah, remember what I said. I'm proud of you. Now, Pamileri Ayodeji plays Funke, this young girl who is really fascinated with her imagination and things like mystical forests and mystical creatures, right? And I think Pamileri did a decent enough job as far as Nollywood goes and as far as being a child actor goes as well. Her co-star, who plays her brother Habib, Moifoluwa Ashenuga, I believe his name is, he did well too, and as far as Nollywood goes and as far as being a child actor goes. However, with both characters, I had certain issues with, Habib and Funke, the two kids. For example, we're not really shown or told much about their personal lives. In this film, it's really just about the mystical creature Mikolo and the mystical forest. Typically with children's films like this, the main characters, the children, they're having issues maybe with bullying or interacting with other kids or performing in school, or they're having issues with their parents. There's something, supporting the main story, right? They're having a personal conflict or a challenge, but I don't think we had that with these characters, Habib and Funke. Now, their parents are played by Yvonne Jegede and Daniel Etim Effiong. Yvonne Jegede plays their mom, Lola. I don't think that was the best casting for that character. I really didn't see the need for their... Yes, I understand that they're yummy moms who look rather attractive, but I felt like Yvonne Jegede was just a bit too attractive for this movie. For example, they travel, in the beginning of the film, they travel from Lagos to, I think it was Ogun State or something, somewhere else in the southwest, state to state, right? Which is typically a long journey. And she's in she drives in heels and she has hair extensions and she looks like she's going on a date, pretty much. And I didn't really see the need for that. Also, her mom is played by Mogaji, who speaks Yoruba in the film, to her daughter and all that. And I don't think Yvonne Jegede, I don't know where she's from, but I'm not sure if she's very fluent in Yoruba. She speaks a bit of Yoruba in the film, but it just didn't really feel natural. And it made me wonder why they didn't just cast a Yoruba actress who could really go back and forth, in Yoruba with Ayo Mogaji. Or why they didn't just, try and get Yvonne Jegede to learn more lines in Yoruba so that the mother-daughter dynamic would be more believable. So I really did struggle with, that performance from Yvonne Jegede. Daniel Etim Effiong plays her husband, Malik. Surprisingly, he doesn't show up in the film till about 90 minutes into the film, well into the movie, and I found that a bit odd. The issue I had with Malik was that his kids, for a portion of this film, at least when he shows up anyway, they're in trouble, they're missing, right? And he doesn't really come off as being bothered in a way that a father would be bothered in that type of scenario. It just felt a bit off. Finally, Rio David, he plays Abula, who is this elf-like character. He's the protector of the creatures, or at least the good creatures, in Irumole forest. So he's like an elf-like character. He doesn't speak at all in the film. He moves funny. So I think it was a bit of like abstract acting on his part, right? It was an interesting character. If you just accept that this is a children's fantasy film, I think you allow for that character and his certain peculiarities in the movie. But I think Rio David did a good enough job. By and large, the performances in this film, I struggled with them because they didn't feel very Nigerian. They felt quite foreign. And I kept on contrasting the performances in this film with, the performances of families in other children's fantasy films, like maybe like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Peter Pan, or Spy Kids and all that, where the characters in such films, they're not entirely realistic. Understandable, but it felt a bit jarring seeing these unrealistic characters in a Nigerian film, because there are just certain things in Nigeria that I don't think will fly, even though it's a children's fantasy film. For example, the character Funke, the young girl who is fascinated with the mystical creatures and mystical forest, in a Nigerian context, that's a bit weird. It's cause for concern, So, but they didn't really address it from that angle in this film. It was like, it's not a big deal for a child to be into mystical creatures and mystical forests. So it was a bit hard for me to connect with that, knowing fully well that in Nigeria, if their imagination is too wild and they're too concerned with mystical things, it could have like a spiritual and supernatural undertone, and it could be a serious issue in that family. So I found it hard to like believe that whole element and that character Funke in particular, because she was pretty much obsessed with this mystical, creatures and mystical forest thing. And yes, I know it's a children's fantasy film, and in children's fantasy movies and in fantasy movies generally, you're meant to make allowances for creative things and for the imagination. So it's understandable. I was willing to make those allowances, but I found myself for the majority of the film trying to strike that balance between this film being Nigerian enough and me allowing it to be a fantasy children's film, which it is, and allowing the different types of things that come with that kind of film. So I was just trying to find the balance for the majority of the film, and I feel like that's not something that the audience member, should have been doing. I felt like it should have been the assignment of the filmmaker or the writer to find that fine line between something that works for a Nigerian audience, but at the same time will allow the creativity that you find in a children's fantasy film. Ce que j'ai aimé. I liked that they took a chance and they did something different by doing a film for children for the big screen, one that incorporates live action with animation and VFX. You don't see that very often from Nollywood, so kudos to them for that. Ce que je n'ai pas aimé. Ironically, the VFX and the animation in this film, which pretty much was meant to be the selling point of this film, it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't fantastic in several portions of the movie. It was grubby, it was glitchy, it wasn't believable. It had its moments at certain points, but generally, especially when the children are interacting with the character Mikolo, it wasn't giving. The plot of this film too was pretty much non-existent. And the storytelling was not awesome at all. This is one of those films that something will happen and you'll be like, how did we get from here to here? It feels like something is missing in the middle. For example, the elf-like guy, Abula, played by Rio David, right? He leaves his mystical world, comes into the real world to find Mikolo. He eventually finds Mikolo, but before he's able to leave Funke's house with Mikolo, some locals try and accost him because they want to grab Mikolo and maybe sell Mikolo or whatever. But he beats each and every one and he deals with them thoroughly. And we see him leave the compound with Mikolo in a bag. However, shortly after in the film, we see that they've been captured, or we see them like being held captive. So what we don't see is when they were actually captured. And it's confusing because we just see, they made a whole thing of Abula just making minced meat and making, whatever of these thugs and leaving the scene. So when did he get captured? When did he and Mikolo get captured? In addition, Mikolo actually, earlier on in the movie, we see that the creature Mikolo is able to go invisible, right? How is he now captured later on? He could have just gone invisible at some point when the thugs were trying to capture him, whenever they try and capture him, which we don't see because that happens off screen. So there are several lapses. There's also a point in the film. So to get from the real world to the mystical forest, a magical bridge is built, right? At a point, the kids are on the bridge crossing over, but then something happens and the bridge collapses. It's assumed that this bridge is really high up, but the bridge collapses and the children fall too. Ideally, that kind of fall, no one should survive that kind of fall, but for some reason, they do. They're just unconscious. So suffice to say that the storytelling in this film was extremely problematic, and even children will have an issue with it. You know how inquisitive children are. They ask questions, and they're not ashamed of questioning things. So I think that even they won't let certain things slide in this film. Qui doit le voir? I honestly don't know who should see this film, to be honest. I don't know if, children are so intelligent these days and so inquisitive. I don't know if they'll be captivated by this film. I found the film to be quite boring. I couldn't wait to leave the cinema. So I don't know how children will relate to the film or react to it. Well, children can be very unpredictable, so they may actually enjoy it. But if you have to get the kids out of the house and, there aren't other options, which is unlikely because this is the summer, there are lots of options for the kids these days. But if that's the case, there aren't other options and you just have to get the kids out of the house, I guess you could take them to see Mikolo. In conclusion, I think Ant Hill Studios wanted to be commended on doing this ambitious children's film that combines live action and animation, and in the process, they neglected writing a proper story upon which these visuals could be built, because it just felt like the story wasn't there. I mean, what was the moral lesson? Where was the conflict in this film? It just didn't seem to be existent in the movie. Maybe the moral lesson was encouraging children to use their imagination more, that if they can think it, they can see it type of thing, because that theme it featured a bit in the story, right? And also the kids were distant or not really close to their dad because their dad was working all the time. And I think by the end of the film, he decides that it's best that he spends more time with his family perhaps. But these elements they were weak. It felt like they needed to be more solid and to carry the film a bit more, as opposed to the questionable VFX that we were subjected to in this movie. I really do hope Mikolo does well. I felt a bit conflicted saying all these things about a children's film and a Nollywood film as well that dared to be different and dared to try new things. So while I want to commend them on all that, it was still hard to just connect with the film and to go with the film and to be entertained by the film. And ironically, if the film ends with Mikolo will be back or something like that, which suggests that there will be a sequel. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this review, please do me a favor and like it by clicking on the like button just underneath the video, and subscribe to this channel as well by clicking on the black subscribe button. Feel free to share this content with anyone who you feel may enjoy it as well. Now, on this channel, I don't just do Nollywood movie reviews, I also talk about relationships, and I also have an awesome podcast which I'm thoroughly enjoying. I've been talking about a lot of faith stuff on the podcast recently, but I'm going to try and change that because it's not meant to be a faith-based podcast. But if you're into that type of stuff, please feel free to check out the podcast or the playlist of the podcast by clicking the card in the corner of the screen. In that card in the corner of the screen, you'll also find the link to the playlist of my Nollywood reviews as well. Niyi Akinmolayan directs this film, Mikolo, and he also directed House of Secrets, which I reviewed a few weeks ago. That one was a bit, more enjoyable than this movie. Was quite controversial too. But anyway, if you want to check that review or my other Nollywood reviews, you can click the card in the corner of the screen. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been awesome. If you've seen Mikolo, please let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.